So this is chapter 14 out of 15. So we're getting there, folks. We basically are covering, this whole book is considered the essentials of great relationships. So what we've covered were, just as a quick review, the critical laws of relationships. We learned how to identify relationships that need to be ended. And hopefully we're gaining some skills for finding a way to hold on just a second. Can you turn that down, please? What? She's not even watching the TV. So anyway, hopefully we're also gaining skills that will help us draw those relationships to a close in a very loving way. So that's kind of some of the things that we have talked about, like how do you lovingly say this is not working. Last week, of course, we hit a sore spot for Marsha and Mother Trout, as we somehow identified someone in their life. But I think anywhere, there have been multiple times in this where I have felt like, oh, I know, that sounds like someone I know that has been a part of my life. So now for the next 2 weeks, for this week and next week, as we end things, we're going to look at some additional ideas and truths that we know are necessary for great relationships, and to explore the fact that it takes time, effort, and some skill to get into these good relationships or these great relationships, that it's not always an easy process, and that the essential ingredients, one of the essential ingredients for having a great relationship is to be able to be healed from past bad relationships. So we have to be able to move beyond the past to move forward into the future, which is a positive relationship, okay? So today's topic is called The Journey Matters. And what we're going to talk about is the process of understanding what makes a great relationship, and that the journey you have with the person matters. One of the first things that he talks about, and it was absolutely hit home, was the biggest mistake that most people make with relationships, friendships, whatever, is, and if you ask them, what was your mistake with that? They'll say, too much too soon. I gave too much too soon. I was too committed too soon. The person moved too fast. I gave them too much information. I got hurt. They got hurt. I gave too much time. They weren't as committed as I was. So in any relationship, that's like the number one reason why something doesn't seem to work. Sort of like when you're growing up and you remember like puppy love, when you have your first crush, you're madly in love with them and for about a week. And then you're like, no. Because really it's not mutual. Or when you get a new job and you love it, absolutely love every piece of the job, and you're just gung-ho, and then you realize this job ain't that great, because you realize that the job isn't as great as you thought it would be. Or when you're a new parent, for those of us who've been parents, for those of us who are parents, we've had people approach us and, I'm a new parent, please give me all this advice, and they try to link up with you on that one thing, on being a parent, and you're like, yeah, it's different for everybody, but especially he talks about salesmen. They try to build these relationships out of nowhere and be your best friend immediately because they're going to sell you something, and it's that moving too fast too soon feeling. The author talks about this gentleman named Robert, who he hired to be a part of his ministry. And when he did the interview, he thought, oh, this guy's perfect. He has that positive energy I'm looking for, that synergistic relationship seemed to click in the interview, and his experience was good. And he really wanted this Robert to work out because he thought, this is somebody who I can just give him tasks to help me with the ministry and we'll accomplish a lot. Well, Robert was immediately wanting and hinting at wanting access to the author's family, wanting to know things about his life, wanting to get like a real in-depth relationship immediately. And the author talks about like, well, in the past he'd had that happen and he got burned. So he's like, I learned to protect myself and my family from people who jump in too quick. So it's a process. So he said, I just know that until you have earned my trust, I keep my family and my personal business and some of the ministry decisions to myself. And so they went on, and he gave Robert responsibilities, kept giving him responsibilities and things to do. And he started to notice that Robert wasn't doing very well. He wasn't able to complete the responsibilities. He was mishandling situations and just not doing as well as he thought. So he thought, well, I need to give Robert time to grow and develop. And he tried to mentor him and really tried to work with him, work through, what it was he wanted him to do. Well, out of left field, one day Robert comes in and he quits. Boom, I quit. And when he asked why, I thought we were getting somewhere. We were, I was trying to mentor you through the bumpy stuff, all of that. Robert said, nope, it wasn't that I felt like I couldn't do the job. I knew I could. But he was frustrated because he thought that the author should be his best friend. And it wasn't happening, and he was frustrated. He wanted access to the family. He wanted access to certain parts of the ministry that he had kept separate. He wanted basically what the author felt was to ride on his coattails. He wanted to immediately be a part of this ministry in a very significant way. And the lesson here that the author says is to remember is the journey matters. You don't just walk in one day and, oh, you're my best friend. It's a process that develops over time. So the idea is, and what we're going to talk about almost all night now, is the journey and why the journey matters and how important it is. And that sometimes you have to remember that you have to go through things with people in order to develop that authentic relationship. It's not a real and true relationship if you haven't been through some stuff together and helped each other through some things. And that takes time and effort. If you think about your best friends, your closest friends, they're generally people who've been around you a long time. They know you. You've been through things together. They've been through the good and bad with you and vice versa. So that's what we're talking about. So when God wants to accomplish something, in scripture, he has a method, and I never thought of it this way, but I love it. He likes to use a word and a person. So if you're unsure about where you're going and what's going on, remember God likes to accomplish things through a word and a person. Now here's some examples. God accomplished things. Here's some people and some things he accomplished. He gave Noah a word. Noah's the person. The word was build the ark, save the animals. And what did God do? Through Noah, he was able to save the civilization. basically. Through a word and a person, God spoke to Abraham. What happened with Abraham? Abraham's the person. The word was, you will be the father of many nations. And it happened. He used Moses, a word and a person. He gave Moses a word to free his people out of Egypt, and he did, a word and a person. Joshua, he used Joshua to lead people out of the promised land. God gave Joshua a word. Joshua led the people to the promised land. Nehemiah, he rebuilt the walls around Jerusalem through Nehemiah. He reached the Gentiles, bringing them to salvation through Paul, because he gave Paul the word and said, yes, here's the word, here's the person. Paul, here's what you need to do. And then ultimately, through the human entity of Jesus, it's the word, and you know, he brings the redemption of humanity through Jesus. So we see throughout Scripture how God, using a word and a person together, things are accomplished. And that the reason God does this is because he wants to bless and elevate people who he knows can do what he wants them to do. So he also wants to bring people into your circle of people, relationships, who are healthy for you and are not casual in and out, but are deep relationships who can support that word and that task that you may have to do. You cannot build a healthy relationship on false pretenses. You can't build it on dishonesty or disrespect. We've already talked about all of these. So you know that you have to have a pure, solid, deep, full of integrity relationship for the journey to even begin, for you to get where you need to be going, okay? So in the book, the author gives us the prototype for the healthy relationship. He gives us a great example through Elisha and Elijah, okay? He says, here's the prototype for a healthy relationship. Elisha really wanted to be a part of Elijah's life. He admired him as a prophet. He respected him, and he wanted to build that relationship because he saw the journey that Elijah was on. Now, in order for that to happen, Elisha had to be committed to the relationship. He had to respect Elijah. He had to have the desire to help, to do the best that he could, no matter what his mentor asked him to do. He had to actively be involved in whatever was going on. He had to be willing to sometimes deal with the unpleasant situations that happened. And he had to have a willingness to sacrifice the old for something new and different. So he had to leave the past behind for something new and different. So I'm going to give you a couple, some statements on what great relationships are, and show you examples through Elijah and Elisha, okay? Number one is, great relationships require you to prove your commitment and respect. So Elijah, when Elijah and Elisha are first becoming a pair, a bonded pair, a relationship, Elijah asks Elisha, what can I do for you before I'm taken from you? This is early on in their relationship. And Elisha says, let me inherit a double portion of your spirit. Well, Elijah's response is, you have asked a difficult thing, yet if you are with me when I'm taken from you, it will be yours, otherwise not. Well, what he's really saying there is, if you stick with me, if you continue on the journey of this relationship with me, and it has been a priority for you, and this has developed into a deep, solid, genuine, healthy, long-term relationship, then I know you'll be with me at the end of my journey. And so if you do those things and you make that commitment, you'll be with me, and you will be the loyal, strong person that I think you are, and what you ask will happen. But you have to have the commitment to come through the journey with me. I'm not going to promise it because you asked it. I'm not going to say, yeah, sure, before we've gone on this journey together. So basically, he's laying the groundwork for saying, you know, it's going to be a tough road because we have these things we need to accomplish. But if you're with me at the end, anything that you require from me will be given to you. And ultimately, it is. So what it shows us is that a healthy relationship means there's a lot of commitment. And Elisha had to be committed to Elijah, even when it wasn't easy, even when it was unpleasant and grueling and hard and you just want to stop. He had to refuse to abandon or forsake Elijah no matter what was happening. If there were tough times, he had to withstand trials, tribulations, and stand strong because he's committed to Elijah. Now, Elijah's going to feel the same way about him. We know that. So they're building this bond that it goes both ways. So both of them know that they're both going to get ultimately what they need out of the relationship, because they're willing to go through literally hell for each other, because they have made this commitment and they're in it for the good and the bad. Now, sometimes people will commit to a relationship for all the wrong reasons. And we've already talked about some of this. They figure that somehow they're going to get some benefit if I link up with some person. And it's a false kind of loyalty. It's a loyalty based on what am I going to get from it? Or there's disrespect or dishonor, or they disregard the other person, and they cancel out any true benefit before it even happens. And we see with Elijah and Elisha, that's not happening. So they're a good example of that commitment to each other. Okay? A great relationship requires you to want the best for the other person. Okay? So that's another statement. Unhealthy relationships tend to crumble under pressure of the fact that one person might be getting a promotion or a new job or be elevated somehow, and the other one isn't. And that's kind of tough for some people when they feel like we're both in this together, but you're somehow right now at this point in our journey, you're being elevated, and I feel a little bit like I'm being left behind. Healthy relationships can survive that and sometimes even thrive. But the problem is one thing: we're all human, and jealousy, or I mean, there's no other way to put it, jealousy comes into play, because you figure, well, I've done the hard work. I see this person being elevated somehow, and how come I'm not? And we're in this together. We're in this relationship together. Why are they being successful and I'm not? And I read through this and I thought, yeah, you can say all these things on how to not be jealous, but that's a hard place to be. You literally have to say, I refuse to be jealous, and really work on feeling like, no, I have not been left behind. because you haven't been. It's just not your time yet. In the journey, you will be elevated at times and the other person will be elevated at times. And you just have to remember that it's not always at the same time are you being elevated. So you have to remember it's a timing issue. And really resist the temptation of envy and jealousy. What you really have to focus on is the blessing for that person, to encourage them and support them and cheer them on for what they've done. Help them to celebrate, but don't be untrue to yourself and say, well, oh no, I'm not disappointed. You can say you're disappointed, but don't let that jeopardize the relationship. Because like I said, your time will come. It comes in ebbs and flows. And so you have to, like in any relationship, something good may be happening to one person and maybe somebody else is feeling a little stagnant, but that's okay. It's okay. You'll eventually get there. And you're on a journey. It's not, okay, they got promoted, that's the end of the relationship, or that's not a very healthy relationship. Okay? The next one is, great relationships require you to be actively engaged in something positive. People who have healthy relationships are have active, healthy lives. You can't have an active, healthy relationship without an active, healthy life. If you are not doing things to keep yourself spiritually, physically, healthy in so many different ways, you can't share that with another person. You can't wait for things to just happen. You have to go out and get them and get busy making things happen. And the funny thing is, Pastor talked about this, has been talking about this kind of thing. You can't wait for prosperity to just drop out of the sky. You got to make things happen. And you may not know what that is, but you got to make things happen and be that positive energy and actively seek out something. You would invest your time in things that are fruitful and productive and not things that are wasteful. So if you say, I don't know what I want to do, well, I'll read up on some things. Okay, that's fruitful. You're reading on some things. You're saying, I know I need to accomplish, this is where the journey we're on, and these are the, sorry, just had a cat do something. This is our goals. How do we reach our goals? Okay, maybe I need to do some reading, or maybe I need to do some meditating, or maybe I need to do some research on something. So invest your time in something fruitful. Elijah worked hard and was tired and was becoming discouraged. And that's when God said to him, hey, there's this Elisha out here and he really is someone I want you to link up with. So God recognizes when it's time for you, when you feel like I'm out here by myself, folks, fighting the battle by myself. He says, you're not. I'm getting ready to link you up with that right person. And and that's what happened with Elijah. He was getting tired. He was getting discouraged. And God said, here's Elisha. Okay. They were both having productive lives in different manners, in different ways, in different spaces before they linked up with each other, though. They weren't just sitting around waiting for each other to happen. They were both living a full life. They weren't just like, it's sort of like people who say, well, I want to get married, but I can't meet anybody, but I'm not going to do anything about it either. I'm not going to go out anywhere or do anything because I don't want to be alone. You know, well, find things to do, be productive somehow. When you're actively engaged in something like that, God's favor and blessing tends to connect people who are moving forward in the same direction to do so together. So God knows where that link needs to be. And If we are actively engaged, we're going to see that person and we're going to know this is where I need to go. The next one is great relationships require you to demonstrate the capacity for healthy interaction. So when Elijah first met Elisha, Elisha was doing manual labor. He was, just farming. And he was not calling attention to himself. He was being productive, but he was farming. He was not doing anything to stand out in the crowd. But Elijah called him out and said, hey, what about you and me? God says we need to connect here. Elisha at that point had no need for visibility, didn't need acclamation and people saying, hey, what a wonderful farmer you are. He was content to be in the background and learn from Elijah and walk steadily behind him or beside him, not needing attention or applause or acclamation. He was just content to learn from his mentor, knowing his time would come. And that equals no competition between the two. Sometimes what happens is somebody may have more knowledge in one area than the other, or, somebody so you have that opportunity to learn from each other. And it's not about a competition, it's about the sharing of that information. Okay? So the next one is great relationships require you not to mind getting dirty. And this is not necessarily physically dirty. It's accept the fact that sometimes people need to work through their old messes before they can move forward. That's what we talked about a little bit earlier when I said, sometimes you got to let people work through their past to be able to start to move forward. Sometimes it's physical messes, sometimes it's relational messes. We're not perfect, and sometimes we have things we have to work through. But if the relationships are meant to be and are healthy, that's allowed, and it's assisted. And there are healthy messes that you can work through, but there are unhealthy messes that you have to be careful about. And hopefully that's not going to suck you in and get you going down a road you don't need to go down. Okay, so you need to be careful about the unhealthy messes. So you got to be able to kind of distinguish which one is moving us forward and which one isn't. You can't let surface level problems derail your relationship. If you allow insignificant issues to come between you and whoever you're in this relationship with, then the depth, it's obvious the depth of your relationship didn't go very far. You should be able to discuss the surface issues and move through them. They're going to come up. We're all human beings and no one's perfect. But if you allow them to push you apart, the relationship isn't going to go anywhere. The next one is great relationships require you to be willing to sacrifice for something new and better than anything you have known before. Now, when Elijah met up with Elisha and said, come on, let's go. Elisha said, I need to say goodbye first. And you have to think that Elijah was a little concerned because, he's like, come on, we're moving forward, let's go. And he's wondering if Elisha is going to be able to leave all of this behind. Is he going to be able to walk away? And ultimately what Elisha does to prove that he is that he did things to ensure that he couldn't return. He burned the plow, he killed the ox. He did things to ensure that I'm not going back to that. I'm committing to moving forward. I think when we talked about Naomi and Ruth and Orpah, you know, we talked about how hard it must have been to walk away from what you know and into something you didn't know, how Ruth did that. But it was the same kind of thing. I'm leaving that behind me and I'm moving forward. You can't stay in or get into a new relationship if you're still um, trying to please somebody over here in an old relationship at the same time. Your time and energy and your focus are in two different places. It's sort of like having two jobs. I really like this job I had. I got a new job, so I'm starting to build relationships on this new job, but I'm still hanging on to this old job over here and the people. Now, you can still stay friends with them and all that, but your time and your energy and your focus needs to be on moving forward, okay? And then be strategic about what you have to give and know that you don't have unlimited resources and attention. Know that okay, I can't give 60 hours in a day. There's only 24 and I got to sleep. So know and be strategic and say, I only have today this amount of time for you. Sorry. And when we talk about these relationships, you know, we're talking about, you know, friendships, romantic, work, all of those. You have to be able to prioritize everything and be able to say, I only have this much to give today. Whatever that is, this is what I have. Interestingly, Elijah and Elijah, metaphorically, do y'all know what metaphorically means? A metaphor, symbolically. Symbolically, they go through a journey that shows us the path of a healthy relationship. So they start out with, first they go to Gilgal. Well, what is that? That's where Joshua led the Israelites and they observed the covenant ritual of circumcision. It was the place that symbolized the cutting of flesh or the covenant. And we have talked about how every healthy relationship has to have that covenant of truth and honesty and be willing to go through the pain of truth and honesty and love and in a healthy relationship, right? So the first stop is on their journey is Gilgal, where they make that covenant, where they know they can be truthful with each other, that it may be painful, but there's love involved. And there's a covenant of love and truth and honesty. Well, their second stop is at Bethel. Now, Bethel is known as the place of prayer and worship. And you know that we've talked about in order to have this healthy relationship and that the relationship will stretch you and push you, you won't be stagnant at all. There'll be movement. And in order to do that, you have to be able to pray and worship through everything, through the good, through the bad, through the challenges, through the victories. You have to be able to really have prayer and worship in the midst of that relationship. You have to know that God is a significant part of that. The third stop was Jericho. Okay, Jericho is a fortified city. It has thick walls, the stronghold. You know, Joshua was trying to get those walls down, this Jericho symbolizes that any healthy relationship you have is only possible when someone will allow you and you will allow that person beyond those walls and strongholds. Okay, you can't have a healthy relationship when you're hiding behind walls and strongholds. Now, that's not to say that you're going to immediately open up your world to that person, but it may be a process of breaking down those walls and strongholds in order to be honest and vulnerable and transparent in order to do that in a healthy way. Okay. The last is the Jordan River. They end up at the Jordan River, which empties into the Dead Sea. Now, the Dead Sea is where no fish and no plant lives, and it symbolizes death. And ultimately, and the way the author puts it, I was kind of like, oh. He says, healthy relationships are impossible unless both parties are willing to die to themselves and lay aside their agenda and goals for the other person. Now, generally, if you're in a healthy relationship, your goals and your agendas are kind of going to be similar, so you're not really losing all of that. In Romans 12:10 says, be devoted to one another in brotherly love and honor one another above yourselves. So basically you're saying, I honor what you're trying to accomplish for God, and I'm going to be a part of that. So ultimately, this whole lesson is just trying to get you to understand, to embrace the process and the journey of a healthy relationship. It's going to take time, and it requires a process. It's not something you can jump into and a week later it's this perfect relationship. It doesn't happen that way. Don't try to rush it. And strong, healthy relationships are work. They're an investment in time and energy, and that doesn't stop. You can't stop that investment and think that it's going to stay a healthy relationship. It just won't. So it's kind of has to be this constant movement of the journey, or the relationship will take on some of those unhealthy characteristics we've talked about in the past. So let me just do a quick review of the reminders and the points, and then we can have a conversation. How about that? So just to summarize, we have pay attention when you notice that a word and a person have come into your life at a certain time. It is possible that God may be getting ready to do something great. Be looking for opportunities to prove your commitment and show your respect for the people in your life who may be candidates for healthy relationships. Act on those opportunities. Let go of any jealousy or competitiveness in your heart. Let people know that you are content to be in the background and that you are happy to see them shine. Don't sit around waiting for something wonderful to happen to you or for a great relationship to find you. Get busy doing something positive. Be sincere about wanting the best for every person in your life and help them achieve it. Resist the temptation to walk away from a relationship too soon because a person misspeaks or makes an innocent mistake or does something you view as negative, but really is insignificant or minor. You got to give people a chance. And remember that every relationship is a journey. It must go through certain places and learn from certain situations in order to be healthy. Resist the desire to try to skip or race through any set of circumstances necessary for a great relationship. Even if it's painful, embrace it, knowing that it serves a good and healthy purpose in the big picture of a relationship. So, before I ask any questions, what do we think? Anybody? Oops. No thoughts? No questions?
Well, Elder Cindy, I would just like to give an update in regard to the situation, or I told you all about it last week in regard to me going to the store every week, all the time. Seems like, maybe a couple of weeks. I didn't go from March until August. I did let her know after I went to the store for her this last Saturday that, you know, this is starting to feel like an assignment, and I am not going to be, you know, taking time out and going to the store for you every weekend. This is too much. And I didn't go into all the details. I didn't tell her that she went to the casino or none of that. I just dropped it right there, and I left. And then when she came back, she apologized. Hey, I'm sorry. You know, et cetera, et cetera. I know I've been pushing her a whole lot, and I won't ask to go to the store. You go to the store for me unless I'm feeling bad. You know, unless she has, I think, arthritis in her back. You know, so I said I'll help her if she is ill, but if this starts to be something where she's ill every weekend, then you know, I'm gonna cut it off right there. But you know, she said, you know, do you mind going if I'm, you know, feeling bad or something like that? I said, okay, I'll do that for you. But I did confront her, and then oddly enough, I was talking to someone else, and they told me that, well, she's that way with a lot of, I guess, in a lot of situations where she continues to drive and to keep pushing whatever. It's like, I guess there's no barometer, you know, she doesn't have a gauge to say, hey, I need to be more considerate of whatever. But anyways, you know, I confronted her, and things are better. Hopefully, we'll see going forward. But I'm so appreciative of life class, and you know, all the things that I learned, and you know, the boldness that because I felt I was in a place that I didn't want to offend her, you know, or make her upset or sad by not going to the store. But you know, after she started going out other places or whatever, I said, well, this COVID excuse is not standing up if she's going to the casino and different places. So, but thank you. I just wanted to say that.
Well, I think that's awesome. I think that is a testimony to, you know, you thought it was going to be real difficult, and then also finding out that other people have said she takes advantage of situations and pushes. I think that's awesome that you did that, and it turned out so well. And I have a feeling she probably is not going to push as hard. She realizes what her limits with you that she, you know, overstepped. So if it's kind of her normal behavior, you've kind of set her back on track, and without losing that relationship. And that's what, you know, we had talked about. There's a way to do it without creating animosity between you and her. So you did very, very well. So proud of you. Yay. You had all of us telling you what to do, and you didn't even need all that. Look at all this. I'm looking at all the smiles of people who are like, yep, we told you what to do. Anyone else? What do you think about the journey? Any thoughts at all? I think of people who fall in love very quickly. Do you ever, if you know people like that, oh, they meet somebody and boom, they're in love. And you say to yourself, no, you know, how do you know who this person is? You know, and they.
Well, I had several people in my life that I thought I would help them out. I brought them to my home, fed them. But it turned out to be a negative relationship. It was hurt my family, and I had to tell them they had to go. That I could not have it in my house anymore. And this one person continually calls me at 2 o'clock in the morning to come pick them up, and I had to tell them no.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it. And it's hard because I care for this person, but I needed to draw a line that they had to understand that I'm not going to do that anymore.
See, and that's the unhealthy. We know when we see that it's an unhealthy relationship, we have to draw those lines and know that it, you know, we want those healthy relationships that are going in the same direction and are not pulling us back into something else.
Right.
See, and that's That's the problem when we
Right,
have people who are
exactly.
trying to pull us back into, but you always did stuff for me in the past, or, and sometimes like it said, the past can get a little ugly, but you have to be able to say,
Yeah.
no, we're not moving in the same direction. you know God says I need to be moving this way, and you're not moving that way with me. And we can still love people and say, but I got to keep my distance,
Right.
and know that God has other
Yes.
people out there for you to connect with, who are heading in the same direction as you. I think that's the key.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's the messy past that sometimes creeps up on us. Okay. I have to ask a question because you guys aren't talking to me. And in your own words, why is it necessary for relationships to go through certain things if they're going to be strong, healthy, and valuable to both parties involved?
Repeat that.
Yeah, repeat that one.
In your own words, why is it necessary for relationships to go through certain things if they're going to be strong, healthy, and valuable to both parties involved?
I think you have to see if in certain situations each person can like pull their weight, can like either help or have ideas, it benefit each other. And you won't know that until you all get to a situation or something pops up, and then you'll know whether it can be a deep relationship, or it's like you were saying before, it's just something on the surface, and the first rock that hits the water, and everything falls apart. So yeah, I think you have to go through ups and downs to see how the relationship is going to withstand.
And I think that it also demonstrates the faithfulness and devotion, how people are, how true you are to each other, like for better or for worse.
Yeah. And sometimes people will tell you, oh, well, I just saw their true colors because something happened and I see their true colors. And it may be shocking, and it may be something you have to talk through, but if you are on this journey together, you can talk about what happened, why they responded the way they did. Sometimes a reaction or a response is based on, a past experience. And you wouldn't know that if they never give that response any other time. They may be an easygoing, very, very easygoing person, and all of a sudden one day they snap and you're like, what just happened? What just happened? I've never seen that. And it had to do with a particular thing, not that's that particular thing triggered something else from their past. And that's also a part of the letting the walls down.
Yeah.
Letting those walls come down so that someone can see that, okay, some things trigger me. Some things are my pet peeves. If you, we used to laugh at my, I come from a large family. There were, six of us kids, small house, lots of kids. My brother-in-law was the youngest of three, and there was 10 years difference between him and his next sibling. So he was like an only child, and his parents were older. And he initially was extremely unnerved by our house. He really was. It made him nervous. There were always so many people all the time talking and moving and things. And honestly, my sister said that was one of the initial things is he kept saying, is it always like that? And she's like, yeah. Is it never quiet? You know, because he came from an environment where his parents were older. It was always quiet. It was him and his parents.
Mhm.
And he didn't get it. But ultimately, he used to find great humor in it, but that was something that made him extremely uncomfortable, and he had to get used to. And if my sister and he couldn't work through that little bit, they would never have lasted for as long as they did, you know. But it's those things where you begin to understand where somebody's personality, how it was formed, and what's their trigger, and what's their background, and are there other issues that were involved, you know, and you get to know the person. So I'm always highly suspect of people who fall in love too quickly. I'm very suspect.
Mhm.
I'm madly in love. Have you known people, anybody known people like that?
Mhm.
I'm in
Mhm.
love again. Who is it this time?
Again.
Yeah, I mean, look at this. I see sister, look at Marsha's got this big smile. Yeah, we know people like that. Yeah, I'm in love again. You know, I'm always highly suspect of people who are constantly falling in love. They're in love with being in love.
Mhm. That's it. Yep.
It's almost like they're trying to find something that's hidden somewhere, and they got to look under every nook and cranny to find it. It's not.
And sometimes I think people are like, you're like, huh? There's like, you guys don't even have anything in common.
Yeah.
And
Right.
you think, well, you don't even have like anything in common, like nothing. That's just lust, you know. You're just looking at the outside
Yeah.
person. And I just always am very, you know. Now I have seen people who have been able to discern very quickly, and I don't mean within a day, but within, let's say, a year or so, that this is my life partner, within a year or so. And to me, that you know, then they were able to make that bond. They were able to move forward. They were able to, and that seemed to be mature, and honestly, it seems to work. I've seen people do it, and it stuns me because I think, but then but they're able to do that because they're able to have that healthy relationship. And even when they hit bumpy roads, they seem to be able to get through those bumpy spots. But I mean, yeah. Any other questions or comments? Now, I'm going to tell you that I'm going to give you a preview of next week, because I laughed very hard, because our last chapter is Love, Sickness, and the Cure.
Love sickness. Okay.
Love, sickness, and its cure. So we're going to cure love sickness. And actually, it's actually, I think, a very fun, I think it's one of the better ones because of how he handles it. And he just talks a little bit about how when one person is overcommitted to a relationship and another one is not, and how they miss each other like this, and they just can't seem to get it right. And so I got a kick out of when I was reading it. I kept thinking, oh boy, this is going to be a doozy to end on. Love, sickness, and its cure. But it's the reality that we want healthy relationships. We want it all to work. But sometimes we're not. And like today, we want to be on that journey together with people who were in tandem with relationships, whether it is a ministry. I'm talking about any kind of relationship. If you're not in sync with a person that you're working on a ministry thing with, you're going to feel it, and it's going to be a struggle, and it's not going to go as well as you thought it should, because you're not working together, and it's not a healthy working relationship. You're not in the same place for whatever reason. And sometimes you think, well, I'm just working on this ministry project. It makes a difference if you can be open and honest with someone and say, this isn't working for me. Here's why. Here's a bump in our road. Like, I'll use us as an example, Elder Marcia. When Pastor sent us an email, well, it was a message a few weeks ago. We were not in the same place as he was. And the thing is, initially I got it, she got it, he sent it. Nobody responded. So when I saw Elder Marcia in church that day, that I was like, what did you think of this message? And she's like, what? So then I knew that she and I were on the same path. We don't know where he was. Because we honestly, it was a communication, like, he wants us to do what? And ultimately, we talked through some of it. We're back on track again, the whole 9 yards. But it was a little bump in the road. And it wasn't like, okay, we have been doing these life classes, and we got into a rhythm of doing them and how we wanted to do them and all of that. And he threw us a curveball. He wants us to do something different. And we're like, no. But they did, but there is trust, there is respect, there was the ability to talk and say, okay, maybe we misunderstood what you said because there was confusion. But honestly, we're all moving in the same direction. It's just that initially we were like, what was that? Because it was not this, there was movement in our journey. It just, we were going somewhere he wasn't. So,
Right.
So it happens, but we were able to say to him, hey, we don't understand. Maybe what you said is not what we're hearing. Did you want us to do this or that and help us? And then when we talked it out on a call, and then we talked about it at church, and we had a couple conversations, okay, now we kind of are back on track again. That's one of those, it could have been a very deep break in our relationship, in where we're going, but it wasn't. It was a surface one because there was a misunderstanding. And we went ahead in the same direction. We were just misunderstanding what he was asking us to do. So
Right.
it's all in your approach when you're saying, this isn't working for me. Something's a little haywire and I don't understand. And to get that communication going. So